In 2008, on a remote island called Leeson Hubert in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, stood a secret laboratory owned by the company InGen. The place didn't look conspicuous from the outside, but inside, scientists were busy conducting forbidden genetic experiments on dinosaurs. They weren't just trying to bring prehistoric creatures back to life, but also creating new species that had never existed before. One day, an employee carelessly threw away his food wrapper. The plastic was blown by the wind and got stuck in one of the security system door panels. Shortly after, all the alarms blared loudly. Emergency lights flashed, workers panicked and ran in every direction. In the midst of the chaos, that careless employee got trapped inside the research room. He tried to open the door, but the system was broken. From the shadows, a mutated dinosaur emerged, Distortus Rex. The creature let out a low growl and ended the careless employee's life. 25 years later, the world had completely changed. Dinosaurs now lived freely in various parts of the globe. They had been released into the wild after the incident at Jurassic World, when a group of people freed them for moral reasons. Scientists later discovered that most dinosaurs preferred to live in tropical climates, far from human civilization. In New York City, a pharmaceutical company executive named Martin had a big plan. Martin wanted to create a medicine for heart disease using a very rare main ingredient, genetic samples from live dinosaurs. To carry out this mission, Martin recruited a secret military agent named Zora. When Martin explained that their target was a giant dinosaur, Zora immediately refused. She thought the mission was too dangerous and impossible to do. But Martin didn't give up. He convinced Zora that if they succeeded, the medicine could save up to 20% of the human population suffering from heart disease.
They are all amazing. You go there, you die.
Percent of the world's population will...
Besides, Martin said in a calm tone, "I'll pay you $10 million if you agree." That amount made Zora go quiet. She stared at Martin, deep in thought. $10 million was enough for her to retire forever. After thinking for a moment, Zora asked about the risks they would face. Martin explained that besides having to face the dinosaurs, their mission was also illegal. They would be infiltrating a forbidden zone strictly guarded by the UN. If caught, it would all end in prison.
Where every government on the...
Well, we better not tell anyone then.
But for Zora, that much money was enough to cover her fear. She finally accepted the offer. The next night, Martin took Zora to a dinosaur museum that was almost closed. There, they met Henry, a dinosaur expert scientist who had been working with Martin for the last 6 months.
2 decades. Sorry for this, can't get it.
Henry was the one who developed the basic formula for the medicine they were pursuing. Henry explained that they needed blood samples from the 3 largest living dinosaurs out there. "The bigger the dinosaur, the stronger its heart," said Henry. "And that means the greater our chance of finding the enzyme that can cure heart disease." The 3 dinosaurs they were targeting were the Mosasaurus, the Titanosaurus, and the Quetzalcoatlus, giant creatures that now lived on a legacy island of the bankrupt and abandoned InGen. Martin decided they had to leave that very night. He didn't want a competitor company to get the samples first. Initially, Henry refused to go. He thought his role was only as an advisor in the lab. But when Martin asked, "Don't you really want to see a live dinosaur with your own eyes?" Henry fell silent for a long time.
Until you've done that.
Nobody cares.
No, yeah. Take...
After thinking, Henry finally nodded in agreement. The 3 of them flew to Suriname to meet Zora's contact, a ship captain named Duncan. As soon as they arrived, Martin immediately asked if Duncan had prepared the ship as promised. But Duncan's answer immediately changed the mood. In a heavy tone, Duncan apologized and said that he had decided to back out of this mission. He thought the mission they were about to undertake was too dangerous, especially since it was illegal. Hearing this, Martin looked annoyed. He had flown all this way only to hear that Duncan had suddenly canceled their agreement. Zora suggested that Martin try to renegotiate. Maybe Duncan just needed a higher offer to change his mind. Martin knew he was being squeezed, but he had no other choice. Finally, in a firm tone, he offered to double the payment. The total fee for Zora and her team became $20 million. Hearing that number, Duncan, who was initially hesitant, immediately nodded in agreement.
Why's that?
Soon after, Zora's other associate, Bobby, joined them. Bobby was a security specialist tasked with keeping them safe during the mission. After everyone was ready, they set off that same day. On the ship, they were accompanied by 2 other crew members. As the ship started moving, Martin explained their plan. He said that the InGen company had previously implanted a tracking device on a Mosasaurus. This way, they could easily track its whereabouts. Based on the data that Mosasaurus was often seen around Leeson-Hubert Island, the island InGen had previously used as a dinosaur research site. Now the island was off-limits to everyone, but the good news was, all 3 dinosaurs they were targeting were there. This meant they didn't need to waste time searching elsewhere. Meanwhile, Henry watched Bobby checking his weapons. With a worried face, Henry said, "We're here just to take blood samples, not to hunt dinosaurs." Bobby turned and calmly replied, "Relax, Professor. We won't hurt them unless our lives are in danger."
It's a sin. We don't belong.
It's kind of our specialty.
Henry then explained the tool they would use, special bullets containing a blood suction system. The bullet had to be fired from a maximum distance of 10 meters. After finishing drawing blood, the bullet would automatically exit the dinosaur's body without leaving a serious wound.
But I think we
That's me. I had to tell his wife.
can't keep this up for.
As their ship sped along, elsewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, a family was enjoying a summer vacation. Reuben, along with his 2 children, Isabella and Teresa, were sailing leisurely on a small boat. Also joining them was Teresa's boyfriend, a young man named Xavier. When Reuben asked Xavier to take over steering the boat, Xavier flat out refused, saying he was still sleepy. Xavier went back into the cabin and slept again. Reuben could only shake his head in annoyance, unable to understand why his daughter would date such a lazy young man. A moment later, Teresa, who was standing on the deck, saw something in the distance. A large shadow was moving on the ocean's surface, heading towards them. Teresa squinted, trying to make sure. It turned out to be a giant-sized marine dinosaur. Before they could react, something hit the bottom of their boat. A loud crash overturned their vessel.
You know what?
Reuben immediately shouted for Isabella and Teresa to climb onto the overturned part of the boat to avoid drowning. Reuben himself dove down to look for Xavier, who was still trapped inside. With great difficulty, they managed to open the jammed door and finally got out to the surface. But the increasingly turbulent waves made Reuben realize something was stalking them from beneath the water.
The bag.
The next morning, Duncan, who was checking the navigation equipment, suddenly heard a faint, panicked call for help over the radio. Duncan immediately called the others and informed them that the source of the call wasn't far from their current position. But there was one problem. If they decided to help those people, they would have to turn around and move away from the mission's primary target. Martin outright refused. He figured whoever had the radio must have other ways to call for help. Martin reasoned that their ship was already too close to the first target's location, so it was better to stay focused on the mission. But Duncan, as the ship's captain, couldn't just stand by. He stared sharply at Martin and said that human lives were more important than anything. His decision was final. They would help those people first, and only then resume the mission. The ship turned around. Soon after, they found a small, overturned boat in the middle of the ocean. From among the waves, they managed to pull Reuben, Isabella, Teresa, and Xavier safely onto their ship. Inside the ship, a still-shaken Reuben explained that they were attacked by a giant sea creature. His face was pale, but what confused him was the reaction of the people in front of him. Instead of being scared, Zora and the others actually looked excited, as if this was good news. Reuben then realized the people who had saved them weren't ordinary sailors, but dinosaur hunters. Zora then looked at the monitor displaying the tracking signal. A large mosasaurus was moving quickly towards them.
Grateful to you. Stubborn and sick.
No.
A few seconds later, the ship shook violently. Everyone quickly got ready. Martin looked at Reuben and his family and said in a serious tone, "Sorry, we can't take you away from here right now. After the first mission is done, we'll drop you off at the nearest island. There's an old InGen laboratory there that's still safe." Reuben nodded slowly, still confused by the situation he was facing. Outside, the atmosphere became tense and thrilling. The mosasaurus surfaced from the water. The creature was so large that its shadow covered part of the ship. Zora stood on the deck, ready with her weapon. Henry helped fasten a safety harness on her. Duncan, who was in the wheelhouse, steered the ship closer so Zora could get an ideal firing range. But when they were close enough, the mosasaurus suddenly leaped from the water, causing Zora's first shot to miss. Seawater sprayed high, shaking the ship violently. As Zora was about to shoot again, the mosasaurus slammed into the side of the ship. Zora almost fell over, but Henry quickly pulled her back. With a hand that was still shaking, Zora aimed again and fired a second shot. This time, the syringe bullet hit its mark right in the mosasaurus's body. A few seconds later, the bullet detached and floated back towards them. Henry caught it and smiled in relief. They had successfully and safely obtained the first blood sample, but the victorious mood didn't last long. Henry looked at the bullet with a serious expression. He then said softly to Zora, "If Martin succeeds in getting all the samples, I'm sure he won't share that medicine with everyone. He'll sell it at a high price. Only the rich will be able to afford it." Zora stared at him coldly. "Drop it. Don't talk about that," she said curtly. "I don't want to lose my payment just because you're feeling sympathetic." Teresa stared out to sea with a pale face. In the distance, she saw a group of large creatures running among the trees, approaching the shore. When they emerged fully, Henry was stunned. It was a pack of Spinosaurus. But what shocked him more was that the pack seemed to be cooperating with the mosasaurus in the ocean, as if they were hunting together as a team. Bobby, seeing the situation deteriorating, immediately stepped forward and fired at the Spinosaurus pack to distract them. But before he could retreat, a Spinosaurus came from behind and instantly ended his life. Bobby didn't even have time to scream. His body vanished in an instant. Soon after, the mosasaurus surfaced again, shaking the ship with its impact. Isabella, who was standing at the ship's edge, almost fell into the sea, but Reuben quickly pulled her back. The situation grew more critical. Duncan decided to steer the ship through the rocks near the island. The engine roared loudly. Seawater splashed everywhere. Zora and Henry prepared on the deck, holding onto lifebuoys in case the ship actually sank. Reuben told Teresa to go inside and use the radio to call for help. But before Teresa could send the signal, Martin appeared and stopped her.
Hey, whoa. We gotta just get...
During the struggle, Teresa lost her balance and was thrown to the side of the ship. She held onto the iron railing, her body almost falling into the sea. "Martin, help me!" she screamed in panic, but Martin just stared without moving. The next second, Teresa's grip slipped, and her body fell into the water. Xavier, who saw this happen, immediately jumped without a second thought, bringing a lifebuoy to help her. A panicked Reuben then urged Isabella to jump too, because the ship was almost sunk. Behind them, the mosasaurus slammed into the side of the ship again. The impact was so hard that the ship was thrown towards the coral reef. Duncan yelled for everyone to jump now.
They can't go in the shallow!
The ship finally ran aground at the edge of the island. Meanwhile, on the other side of the island, Reuben, Teresa, Isabella, and Xavier managed to survive. Although their bodies were covered in cuts, Reuben tried to stay calm. He urged his family to go into the forest, hoping to find the laboratory Martin had mentioned. On another beach, Henry urged Zora and Martin to keep moving because the roar of Spinosaurus could still be heard in the distance. Soon after, Duncan and his crew emerged from the wreckage of the ship. As they gathered, a scream came from behind. Everyone turned and saw a female crew member being attacked by a Spinosaurus. The creature snatched her from behind and dragged her out to sea. No one had time to help. Martin stared towards the forest with a tense face. "We have to be careful. This island was used by InGen for experiments to create mutant dinosaurs," he said quickly. Zora, hearing this, stared at him sharply. "And why didn't you say that from the beginning?" she said in an annoyed tone. Martin didn't answer. Zora took a deep breath and then looked at the remaining team. "All right," she said firmly. "Let's finish this mission as quickly as possible. I've prepared a backup plan if something doesn't go according to plan." They all looked at each other, realizing they had just stepped into danger far greater than they had imagined. Tomorrow night, a rescue helicopter is scheduled to come to the landing pad at the laboratory complex. But the time is very limited. The helicopter will only stop for 2 minutes. If they don't arrive on time, it means they'll be trapped on this island forever.
Just land.
Pilots want.
We have to go now.
Zora could only hope that Reuben and his family managed to survive and reach the laboratory before the helicopter came. As they moved through the silent swamp, Zora suddenly looked at Martin and asked in a serious tone, "How did Teresa get thrown from the ship earlier?" Martin quickly replied, saying that Teresa had slipped accidentally. But Zora didn't believe it so easily. She stared sharply at Martin and warned him that if it was later proven he was the cause, she wouldn't hesitate to leave him alone on this island.
And then
You can rejoin the food chain.
you're smart to die.
A little while later, while getting water, Martin found the completely destroyed wreckage of a helicopter. All its passengers were dead. From this, he realized one thing. The rescue helicopter might never come for them. Meanwhile, on the other side of the island, Reuben and his family found large pipes that looked like geothermal conduits, a clear sign that there was indeed a hidden laboratory complex on this island.
Might be a little damp, but do you smoke?
He's,
Isabella, who was walking behind, let out a small scream when she saw a tiny dinosaur approaching, but Reuben calmed her down, saying that the little dinosaur was a plant eater, not a predator. That night, they rested under a large tree. Reuben thanked Xavier for saving Isabella's life earlier. He also apologized for previously thinking Xavier was a lazy kid. Now Reuben realized that Xavier was actually a brave young man who was willing to sacrifice himself for the safety of others.
It's true. But we don't have to do the job for... Hey.
Xavier just smiled, then excused himself for a moment to relieve himself. The next day, Zora and her team were stunned to see 2 giant titanosaurs standing in front of them. The creatures towered high, their heads almost touching the clouds. Henry, curious, mustered the courage to approach and touch the leg of one of them. Zora immediately fired the blood suction bullet into the titanosaur's body. After the blood was successfully drawn, the bullet detached automatically and Duncan quickly caught it. They successfully obtained the important sample, then continued their journey up the hill towards the Quetzalcoatlus nest. Meanwhile, on the other side, Isabella asked Reuben for permission to keep the small dinosaur that kept following her. She named it Dolores. As they crossed the river, Reuben saw a boat on the opposite bank and concluded that the laboratory they were looking for must be nearby, following the direction of the geothermal pipes they had found earlier. Teresa then took the initiative to cross the river to get the boat. But she stopped when she realized a T-Rex was sleeping not far away. She slowly approached and saw that the boat was already damaged. Luckily, there was a box containing an uninflated rubber boat nearby. Carefully, Teresa pulled the box to the riverbank. However, as she tried to inflate the rubber boat, the T-Rex's snoring suddenly stopped. The creature woke up and started moving. Teresa held her breath as the T-Rex walked towards the river to drink. As soon as she had a chance, she signaled to the others to get into the boat.
Come on, come on.
They paddled away with all their might, but the T-Rex noticed their presence and began to chase them. The creature roared loudly and then smashed their boat, overturning it. Everyone fell into the river, which had a very strong current. They were separated, swept away by the current, while the T-Rex was still chasing from behind. Fortunately, ahead there was a narrow gap in the rocks that the T-Rex's large body couldn't fit through. Reuben and his family managed to escape and climb onto the riverbank, out of breath but safe. On the cliff above, Zora, Henry, and Leclerc watched the event from a distance before finally descending towards the Quetzalcoatlus nest. Duncan and Martin stayed on guard above, planning to take a sample from the Quetzalcoatlus eggs, as capturing an adult would be much riskier. While checking the area, Duncan found a tunnel hidden by bushes, seemingly leading underground. Inside the Quetzalcoatlus nest, located within the ruins of an old temple, Henry collected fluid from the eggs there. Zora, still curious, asked, "If we don't give these samples to Martin later, who are we actually going to give them to?" Henry answered calmly, saying that he knew a charitable health institution that wanted to develop heart disease medicine to be accessible to everyone, not just the rich. That answer made Zora fall silent, realizing their mission might be much bigger than just surviving on this island. Outside, Duncan's crew watched tensely as a large Quetzalcoatlus entered its nest. A panicked Zora and Henry immediately abandoned their samples and tried to back away slowly. But from behind, Duncan's crew member suddenly threw a hammer at the dinosaur to distract it. Instead of fleeing, the creature got angry and immediately chased him. The crew member climbed with all his might, screaming for Duncan to pull him up. Duncan immediately pulled the rope tied to his crew member's body, but the rope was also connected to Henry, causing Henry's body to be pulled and nearly fall. Luckily, Zora was quick to hold him back before Henry was also pulled into the ravine. But when Duncan finally managed to pull his crew member up, all that remained was a wet, blood-stained rope. His crew member had been eaten by the Quetzalcoatlus. Duncan and Martin, seeing this, immediately panicked and ran into the secret passage behind them, hoping to hide. Meanwhile, Henry tried to reach the blood sample that had fallen, but just as he was about to get it, his safety rope suddenly snapped. Henry fell down, but luckily his body landed in water. Zora and the others quickly went down to help him. Though tired and soaking wet, they finally managed to obtain the last sample they were looking for. On the other side, Reuben and his family, following the river, finally reached the laboratory complex. The large building looked old, but still stood strong amidst the thin fog. Reuben immediately took his family inside to look for a communication radio. Sometime later, Zora and her team also arrived at the same location. While checking the area, Zora found footprints in the muddy ground. She was sure they belonged to Reuben and his family. With great hope, Zora shouted, calling for them.
Hello? But we are in a crunch.
Soon after, the two groups finally reunited. But the happy atmosphere didn't last long. Teresa, who was still upset, finally revealed the truth. She said that Martin had let her fall into the sea on the ship. Zora immediately stared angrily at Martin and demanded an explanation, but Martin didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a gun and aimed it at all of them, forcing everyone to stay calm. Martin then snatched the case containing the samples from Zora's hands and tied it to his own wrist. He said coldly that they could sort all of this out later, after the pickup helicopter arrived.
We just gotta make sure they
Get on the helicopter and we must be on a time.
Stop talking! Stop talking!
Night fell. The laboratory lights turned on automatically, illuminating the large room with a pale white light. But the calm only lasted a moment. From the ceiling, several mutodons suddenly appeared, targeting them. Everyone immediately scattered and ran. Reuben and his family ran into a long-abandoned shop. Duncan and Henry ran deeper into the laboratory, while Zora and Martin chose to hide under a car.
What are they?
Get to the back.
One of the mutodons managed to pull the case from Martin's grasp until it came loose. The creature then broke through the roof of the shop where Ruben was hiding. Without a second thought, Ruben took his family into a water drainage channel to escape. Elsewhere, Duncan found a large map on the laboratory wall. From it, he learned that the drainage channel led directly to the dock. Through the CCTV feed, Duncan also saw one small boat still hanging there. It was their only hope to get off the island. Soon after, the sound of a helicopter was heard in the distance. Duncan told Henry to signal by firing a flare, while Duncan himself went to find the others. But Martin, still trying to save himself, took the case and escaped in a car towards the dock. At the same time, Zora saw one of the mutodons infiltrating the drainage channel, following Ruben and his family. Without hesitation, Zora went in to help them. Henry fired a flare into the sky to attract the helicopter's attention. But Henry didn't realize that a giant D-Rex emerged from the trees behind him. The creature immediately pounced on the helicopter, shaking it violently before throwing it, smashing it to pieces. Duncan, who saw this happen, hurried towards the drainage channel. He met Ruben and his family and told them the channel would lead them straight to the dock. Soon after, Zora appeared, shooting at the mutodon that kept chasing them from behind. Without much talk, they all ran as fast as they could, following the water current towards the dock, their only way to survive. They finally reached the drainage channel's exit door. But the problem was, the large door could only be opened from the outside. Without much discussion, Isabella bravely went out first. She sneaked toward the control box on the outside of the door, trying to release the main lock. At that moment, from the darkness, a large shadow appeared, the D-Rex. The creature stepped slowly towards the door, its body gigantic and its eyes glowing red through the mist. With full courage, Isabella finally managed to pull the door release lever. But their joy was short-lived as the D-Rex stood right in front of the exit. In that critical moment, Martin appeared from the right side in a speeding car. The car's headlights attracted the D-Rex's attention. The ferocious creature immediately turned and approached Martin's car. The car stopped abruptly, and before Martin could escape, the D-Rex snatched him up. The case containing the samples that Martin was carrying was thrown to the ground. Zora quickly ran to grab it, while Duncan shouted for everyone to head to the boat at the dock. As they ran, Zora pressed the automatic closure button, trapping the mutodons inside the laboratory so they couldn't get out. Upon reaching the dock, they immediately tried to release the chain still holding the boat. But the boat's engine was jammed and wouldn't start. Meanwhile, the sound of the D-Rex's heavy footsteps grew closer, accompanied by its snorting breath and roars that shook the night air. Duncan took the initiative. He lit a red flare and held it high to attract the D-Rex's attention. Zora tried to stop him, but Duncan refused. He forced the others onto the boat while he stayed on the dock, running towards the forest to lure the D-Rex away from them. With trembling hands and hurried breath, Zora finally managed to cut the boat's mooring rope. Ruben then started the engine. Just as the D-Rex emerged from the trees, the boat began moving away from the dock. The creature tried to chase them, but the boat was already too far. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They had truly managed to escape. A few minutes later, they saw the red light of a flare waving from the direction of the forest. Zora smiled in relief. "He's still alive," she said softly. Without hesitation, Ruben turned the boat around and they went back to pick up Duncan. On the journey back, the atmosphere on the boat began to calm down. Henry sat next to Zora and looked at the case beside her. He then asked softly, "Zora, what are you going to do with all those samples?" Zora looked at the case for a moment, then answered firmly, "I'm going to hand them over to the charity. They can make heart disease medicine from this, medicine that everyone can access, not just the rich." Henry nodded slowly. The boat continued on its way, leaving the danger-filled island behind and carrying new hope for the world.